The last time I talked about La Selección on the channel in an official capacity, I had just reached a breaking point because days before writing and recording that video, the US had beaten Mexico 2-0 in the Nations League final. This game not only marked the US's third Nations League win in a row, but it was also the 7th match in a row between the US and Mexico where the US remained undefeated. Safe to say I was going through it, but a lot has gone down since then. Okay, I'm gonna get a little bit deep here. Pause. In life, nothing is permanent. Things are about to change whether you were expecting it or not. So if something in life is going terribly wrong, it's only a matter of time until it turns around. So to take it back to football now, that free fall that La Selección was in has somewhat come to a stop. I'm also not gonna lie and pretend we've become some world-class side that can chat to Spain and Germany and Brazil and Argentina and France. We're still a good bit away from reaching that level, but we have improved a lot since that specific dreaded defeat that set me off. Could it be that La Federación Mexicana watched my video and started to implement changes within La Selección? Maybe, we really never know. However, thanks to a few key events and some reasons that have come across us over this last year, Mexico does find themselves improving. Of course, the main question we're gonna have to keep asking ourselves is if El Tri is ready for the 2026 World Cup. But in order to answer that, or to at least get a better picture, we do need to take a look at what has happened since March of 2024. And real quick, boys, if you're new to the channel, enjoying the video, enjoying the content, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe. We are dropping weekly football videos as well, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you're not missing an upload. And if you're not new to the channel, boys, welcome back. Glad to have you around for another video. With that being said, boys, let's get into the somewhat turnaround that the Mexican national team has been having. In order to appreciate the sunshine, we have to go through the rainy days. And boy, did Mexico have one last massive thunderstorm, tornado, tsunami hit them before they got their shit together. So after that loss to the US that sent me into disarray, the next priority was the looming Copa America that summer. And in order to get ready, we challenged ourselves with friendly against Uruguay and Brazil. A very massive mistake. Bielsa's Uruguay would make light work of El Tri, and a Darwizzy hat-trick by the 49th minute would see them win 4-0 with Mexico barely putting up a fight. Against Brazil, Mexico would go down again very early and eventually found themselves 2-0 down. But after Charlie Rodriguez got subbed off, the team looked a lot more fluid and managed to seemingly rescue a 2-2 draw. That was until Bobby Charlton cashed in on a massive opportunity to get some PR. But mind you, these were just the warm-up matches. Things weren't even looking good for the actual Copa America, and it was really just a matter of time until we got cooked. And what made things feel just so much worse was the squad selection. The then manager Jimmy Lozano continued to rely on guys that we already knew were bums. Antuna, Memote, Charlie Rodriguez, and Arteaga. So go figure we would end up having a terrible tournament. I've already covered this tournament a lot, and specifically a good bit on Mexico, so I'm gonna try not to repeat myself too much. We got lucky in our first match that we would go up against a fellow CONCACAF rival in Jamaica. The game was dull, and although we did manage to keep Jamaica at bay, we never really created any meaningful chances. To be honest, the creativity in the squad has been an issue for some time, and it never has gotten any better. Oh, and we also lost Edson Alvarez to a massive injury in this match, which did not help anything. Eventually, we would find the opener after Jamaica failed to clear across and came out as winners, but we still had 2 tough matches to go. Against Venezuela, those flaws that I mentioned from the Jamaica game just stayed exactly the same. We struggled to really generate many clear-cut chances, and whenever we would get a half chance, our forwards would not hit it with any conviction. At the 55th minute, this good Venezuelan side would win a penalty which they would convert, and with that, Mexico needed a win against the best side in the group in order to stay alive. Against Ecuador, I wouldn't fault anyone for saying that they fell asleep during this match. If we're being real, Ecuador on a different day probably takes away more from this game, but Mexico just lacked any cohesion. No creation of clear chances, an over-reliance on crossing, no fight despite needing a win, and a failure to make anything of half chances again just saw Mexico go out sad. There was no camaraderie, and even tactically, it felt like the players were just struggling to make anything do with what Lozano was cooking up. With the game ending 0-0, Mexico found themselves eliminated in the group stage and were considered a failure. This was really a turning point for a couple of factors. Firstly, Jimmy Lozano, who previously had been extended to be in the job until the 2026 World Cup, was sacked. Secondly, the fans and even the federation finally were ready to give up on some of the players that we knew were just not good enough. So with that, Mexico had to get ready for the competitions that were coming in 2025 that would really be their final chance to start gaining momentum for the 2026 World Cup. So following the sacking of Jimmy Lozano, Mexico needed to bring in someone that they knew would be able to stamp a clear authority on the players as well as bring in a better system. So with that, we would bring back one of our more successful coaches from the past in Javier Aguirre. Interestingly enough, El Vasco would end up bringing Rafa Marquez as an assistant manager as he had been doing great work with Barcelona B. deep, meaning El Vasco now had a mind that would be bringing in some more modern tactics as well. Definitely positive signs, but we needed to see how this would translate on the pitch. For El Vasco, his first 2 tests wouldn't go too bad. He first would make light work of New Zealand in a 3-0 win, but then saw a 0-0 stalemate against Canada. But one positive that we saw from El Vasco was the fact that he was no longer allowing guys like Antuna, Charlie Rodriguez, Henry Martin to dominate minutes, which was good. They needed to be phased out. Instead, we saw Raul Jimenez being reintegrated into the squad, and guys like El Piojo, Chino Huerta, Santi Jimenez, and Alexis Vega came in to partner him and really started to develop more as consistent players in the team. And around this time, ultimately all eyes would be on that upcoming fixture against the US in a friendly match. This match would be a big one since the US had just appointed Pochettino, and even though the US for this friendly match did miss some players like Pulisic, Balogun, and Weah, the rest of the team was still a strong one that would end up falling 2-0 to Mexico, which meant El Tri and Vasco had finally gotten the best of the US after 8 matches. 2 wins and a draw wasn't the worst start to life for El Vasco, but now he had the quarterfinals of the Nations League to worry about. This round would see Mexico face off against Honduras, with the first leg being played in San Pedro Sula, Honduras. This was a tough match for La Selección. The physicality and press that Honduras was bringing in front of their home crowd would prove to be a very intense one that limited how many chances Jimenez could get on the end of. And after Abuelito Ochoa, who had been giving a chance this match, fumbled the ball following a sloppy giveaway, Honduras would capitalize and open the scoring before getting their second through a Palma wonder goal. El Vasco this match would also take a beer can to the head, and El Tri had to hope that they could turn things around in the second leg in Toluca. They would go on to do just that and also showed Honduras no mercy in that second leg. In this match, Mexico in a packed out Estadio Nemesio 10 got to work and actually managed to link together to generate 27 shots, with 9 going on target and 4 finding their way to the back of the net. But successfully coming back against Honduras, now Mexico had Canada in the semi-finals. Mexico clearly were still not world beaters, but they were improving, and that 4-0 victory against Honduras felt like maybe the team was turning a new leaf. And against Canada, when Vasco came out with the lineup that had both the Jimenezes up top, there was hope that this team could do something. And El Tri would have a dream start, as some intense pressure and lucky bounces did see Mexico take the lead through Raul Jimenez after just 45 seconds. Maybe, just maybe, this is when the team was gonna start flying. But really, they never got cooking. The duo up top never fully clicked this game, and the 4-4-2 shape limited how much the team was really able to build up, meaning they barely had any shots. Luckily, Mexico would get their second goal at the 74th minute as Raul Jimenez scored a beautiful free kick to see out the game 2-0. Definitely bittersweet because we got the win, but it wasn't pretty. We didn't score any open play goals, but a win is a win. Now there was a final to play, and that final would be against Panama in a match that quite frankly would be pretty similar to the one against Canada. Raul Jimenez would once again get an early goal, but this time it was at the 7th minute where he would get on the end of a beautiful cross from El Piojo. However, Panama would actually fight back and won a penalty that they would put away just before halftime. Again, in this match, Mexico would struggle greatly to create any clear chances. The match once again saw us run the 4-4-2 with both the Jimenezes up top, and just like the repeat of the match before, it was not great. But once again, Raul Jimenez would be the hero, as Mexico would win a penalty at the death of the match that he would slot away, seeing Mexico win their first Nations League title ever. A friendlies trophy if we're being real, but a big step mentally when pushing towards the World Cup. With this competition out of the way, now it was time to focus on the upcoming Copa Oro. So before Copa Oro, we would play some tune-up matches to get ready. And one thing the Vasco has changed about La Selección during his time here is that he has opted to set up friendlies against more difficult opposition, which is fantastic for the development of the squad. Objectively speaking, win or lose, getting those friendly matches against better European, Asian, South American teams, it's a better platform to build off for those bigger tournaments. There was a period where it felt like any friendly that Mexico decided to play in would be against very poor opponents, and more so just kept feeding the inflated egos of both the fans and the players. So with that being said, before the Gold Cup, we would play against Switzerland and Turkey. The Switzerland match was not great. Vasco did try out the Jimenez Twin Towers experiment one more time, but again, it just did not work. On paper, our 2 best forwards, but creatively, it just limits the side. Against Switzerland, we did rotate the backline in the midfield heavily, and we were missing our best center back in Johan Vazquez, and this very clearly shows. Switzerland was dicing us up, and at the 20th minute, Embolo got the opener thanks to some shambolic defending. From there, Santi would fire us back level before we gave up 2 goals within 7 minutes to go back down, which pretty much just killed the game. Next up, we had Turkey, who had just came back against the US to win a match 2-1, so it definitely did not feel like it was good vibes, especially considering the fact that Arda Güler and Kenan Yildiz were both started. But the squad was rotated again and overall was a lot more cohesive. The match wasn't perfect for Mexico, as it saw us absorbing a lot of pressure, and more often than not, we didn't really get a chance to create anything, which is why we only had 6 shots total. But after having a throw in high up the pitch, we managed to get the ball in the box where there was some confusion amongst the Turkish defenders, which allowed Pineda to get the game-winning goal. goal. It wasn't the prettiest win, but Copa Oro was next. And in my opinion, since that 2-0 loss against the US, which kicked off my villain arc towards La Seleccion, things have gotten better, but there's also been a lot of papering over the cracks. The talent that Vasco is taking with him and ultimately deciding to give chances to is miles ahead of what Yemi Lozano and Tata before him were choosing. The two Jimenezes, Marcelo Ruiz, Gilberto Mora, El Chino, Alexis, Mateo Chavez, all have been given good opportunities under Vasco, and this has helped the vibe of the team and the quality. However, on the pitch, there are still some big issues when it comes to goal scoring. We have strayed a long way away from our glory years where we had Dio Dos Santos and Tecatito as the main creative sparks, and we have yet to fully replace them. Tactically, we don't set up with the right personnel every time to get the most out of our attackers, and at the same time, the instructions that are being given usually leave us susceptible to counterattacks. And this was on full display in Copa Oro, where Mexico did get out of the group stage, but it wasn't pretty. The first match against the R showed that Mexico still wasn't fully past being too nonchalant about who they were playing. All respect to the Dominican Republic because they have grown massively, especially in the footballing space, but this should have been an easier game for Mexico, and it just became such a difficult one for them at the end. Against Suriname, who were ranked 136th in the world, Mexico still looked far from convincing and only managed to get 2 goals from corners. And then against Costa Rica, we generated the least amount of total shots from all of our group stage games and whimpered to a 0-0 draw. From here, he would continue to be defensively solid through the rest of the tournament as the return of Johan Vazquez helped the backline breeze through, but the attack continued to misfire. Against Saudi Arabia in the quarterfinals, we had an abysmal first half where we didn't have a single chance created in the box. The second half did end up being much better as Alexis Vega would find the opener by exploiting space, and an own goal from a good cross saw us come out as winners. Against Honduras in the semifinals, Honduras thought that they showed up for a UFC match and proceeded to beat the shit out of the Mexican players. But really, Honduras did just create a very physical and feisty game that didn't allow either team to really get a rhythm. The attack would suffer again, but early in the second half, Mexico would come out on fire and 16-year-old Gilberto Mora would shine as he slid in Raul Jimenez to get a goal that would make the difference. Meaning that Mexico's last match would be against the US in the final. A huge match on paper, but there were some asterisks. Mexico coming into this tournament did have all their players ready to come in and ball out. Granted, there were some injuries, the likes of 16-year-old Gilberto Mora had to start the match, but the US really didn't have their strongest squad. Ultimately, Mexico would end up winning the game 2-1, and while on paper that does seem a little bit flattering to the US, this was a complete wash. I watched this entire match, and to be honest with you, I know that the US scored a goal and it was only a 1-goal margin, but it never really felt like Mexico was in danger of losing this match. It was the best game that we had under Vasco, where we pretty much controlled everything. We did create a ton of chances that we didn't capitalize on again, but ultimately Mexico would just be a very comfortable winner in this match. So that's pretty much just catching you up on everything that's happened with La Seleccion since I pretty much went on that rant about a year and a half ago. One embarrassing group stage exit and 2 trophies to boast. Begging the question after all of that of, is Mexico ready for the 2026 World Cup? Well, to be honest with you, my opinion, I think we're ready to do better than we did last time around, which isn't saying too much considering the fact that we got grouped for the first time in like 30 years. But in all seriousness, I do think in this year and a half, we have improved a ton from where we were at before. There doesn't seem to be any negative vibes in the squad. We are starting to challenge ourselves with playing against better opponents, as we've seen with Switzerland and Turkey, which, like I mentioned, win, lose, or draw is still going to be better for the teams to just be ready to go into the World Cup and play those bigger matches. Do I think we can break the duck of that round of 16 match? Maybe. Ultimately, it's going to end up depending on who's even in our group to begin with, but I think we are ready, especially compared to our other CONCACAF counterparts. I think at the moment things look a little bleak for the US. There's a chance they get grouped. Same thing for Canada. Out of the 3, I think we're looking the most ready. I don't think we're fully ready. If you ask me, of course, I think we need to take the time that we do have to lock in tactically, but aside from that, really time will tell.